Life isn't perfect, and neither are we.
Nope. But we know how to face our fears
And have some fun.
and talk about all the messiest things of life.
Like the messiest things.
Get connected to yourself, get connected to others, and get connected to the life right in front of you.
This is The Connected Life with Justin and Abi.
That's me.
That's you.
And you. I like you so much better now.
You like me so much better now.
Yeah, honestly, we spent years in conflict and it created some pretty big pain points for both of us.
Yeah.
And when we learned how to become safe inside of conversations, it brought down so many of my walls, and I like you so much more.
Yeah. And it's interesting because you're less difficult to deal with.
I mean, I think we both are better versions of ourselves. We could have written a book on how to not do conflict.
But here's the deal. We didn't write a book on how to not do it. We created a course called Connected Conflicts on how
to do it.
Yeah. One of the things is that conflict, I was filled with anxiety when it came to conflict. And I think it was high stakes for you as well, right?
Yes, because we didn't learn a map of successful conflict. We never saw it done well. We didn't see it modeled. We didn't have the tools, a practical guide. And so we have actually laid out for you practical steps of exactly what to do to create more safety in conversations and to be able to create more repair so that when you have confidence and you know what to do, you show up differently.
Yeah. And one of the things is that through taking Connected Conflicts, this conflict course that we've created, you're able to develop language and you can create shared language between you and someone else. I think that was one of the hard things for us is like, we were having conversations about things, but we weren't having the same conversation because we didn't understand a universal language. And once we developed a universal language, it actually began to be like, oh, this is so much easier. I'm not continually offended by the things you're saying because I know what they mean.
Yeah. So we want you to join us. Everybody has conflict conversations. Everyone goes through miscommunications, whether it's with your boss, your employees, your romantic partner, your parents, your kids. Like, there is no way to avoid miscommunication. So we might as well get great at communication. And so you can watch us. We'll share how to add safety. We'll give you a practical guide of exactly what to do and steps to do. And then we'll have you watch us do a couple live conflicts so you can see what it looks like in real time. People loved that.
They did. They were like, I think I'm getting some anxiety about this. And then they're like, oh, this went so well. Yeah. So anyways, if you guys want to get a hold of that new course, Connected Conflicts, you can go to Justin and Abi. That's abi.com/connected conflicts with an S. Without further ado, here's the episode. So Abi thinks she knows what I'm going to do to start this podcast
And I never know. It's always a secret, but I have a guess.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, but I'm not going to say anything. I'll just tell you if I'm right.
Hold your guess. So I lost my shit yesterday.
I knew it. I knew it. This will be the story.
Yeah, so it'll go good with this.
Yes, it is.
Great intro. Yesterday we went to the lake, and which we have good friends in town, Johnny and Pietze.
Welcome.
If you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you know their voices.
Yeah. Pietze has been my best friend since I was 7. Johnny is her husband.
That is us. This is us.
We're 16 years into marriage, and how many years has it been? About 10.
17.
I've decided that I've liked you guys.
About 10 that we've actually liked each other. Yeah, and Pietze and Johnny are some of the most brilliant marriage gurus that I've ever met. A marriage guru.
Marriage screw-ups is the word you're looking for.
I say that you guys are attachment geniuses. And when me and Justin have had many different counselors that we have tried, and I have never felt like we got as much progress as sessions that we did with you guys.
Oh, that's kind.
Because it's magical. But anyway, that's they are here. We've done a lot of life together. We're going to have a great episode. Finish your story.
Yeah.
So the story.
So this guy lost his shit yesterday. We went to the lake. We're trying to get some parking. Parking was devastating, trying to find any sense of parking there. And we went back into this corner area, and there was like an end to it. And this person was pulling into a parking spot, which I thought was a parking spot. Later on, I found out it wasn't. Someone else was pulling out of a parking spot. So I'm like, great. I throw on my blinker to get this parking spot. And then this lady that was in front of me backs up, and apparently she was not in a parking spot. And she starts like flailing her arms, pointing at something. And
She was not happy.
She was not a happy camper.
She was not happy.
And she mouths F you, and as she's pointing to her thing. And then I'm like, it's go time. It's fight time.
Yeah, gloves down. You want to go? I
Let's
can
do
go.
this.
I will stare you down.
I can go.
You know, and it wasn't, it didn't elevate into me calling her names or anything,
No.
but it elevated into me yelling at her, and she's yelling at me, and we're giving reasons
It was
why.
a stare down.
And then there was
There
a
was
stare
an
down.
intense stare
There's
down.
death stare down. Because
Yeah.
once she gave me her death stare, I was like, I will not be bullied by your death stare. And I'm like, we could do death stare here. I'm
Yeah.
not breaking eye contact. So we got away from that moment that was very intense. And I dropped all you guys off, went on a drive to find a parking spot, which took me another like 10, 15 minutes. Got my parking spot, and I am working through me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I'm like, because I've been on a kick for quite a while on learning how to face yourself. You'll face yourself
Yeah.
at some point in life, whether it's here or it's eternity. But I'm like, I face me now. So I'm sitting there trying to face myself in this and face the reality of her humanity, my humanity. And
When you say face yourself, what does that mean to you?
that means look honestly at how I show up in a situation, what I brought to the table, how people might have experienced me participating in that moment. So it's not just her, it's everyone within the vehicle. I'm like, all right, why did I do that? How did I impact the people around me? Did this feel like I was humanizing the other person across from me, which she had lost all humanity at that point.
Totally.
And I didn't even care about the parking spot.
Totally.
I was like, you're
You
my
will not bully me though.
Yeah, I will not be bullied in this situation. And I'm sitting there being like, I distinctly said to myself, I don't like the way her and I treated each other.
Mm-hmm.
I love that statement.
We did not treat each other with the dignity of humanity in our anger responses at each other. And I had this thought like, I'm going back the direction she potentially is. There's a good chance
We're gonna run into each other.
We're gonna run into each
I
other.
got crap.
And I already had planned in my mind not to say, hey, asshole, you took my spot. It was, hey, I need to talk to you. I don't like the way we treated each other.
Yeah.
And inside of that space, I sat there and was like, I know that I was intense and I can own me. So I ended up back at the boat with you guys, and I began the process of saying like, look, I need to say that I don't like the way I showed up. I got really intense. And I wasn't in agreement with my value system of love, and powerful doesn't look like me dominating the lady back and staring her down. Powerful looks like me operating out of some realm of love, operating out of the reality of peace. And so I was quick to take ownership for that.
Yeah, and that was awesome. Like I instantly felt regulated hearing you process your own journey and have you come to your own conclusion and take ownership. And I think this is one of the most important things you can learn to have healthy relationships.
Yeah. And I'm not done with my story.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Which led to a great conversation this morning where Johnny told me I was effed up in all kinds of ways. I go pull aside and I go, I want to get feedback.
I'm half naked in a floaty, listening to my Hawaiian jams or whatever.
Yeah, totally.
Uh-huh.
Jam into vintage Hawaiian music. And I was like, hey, I want to know what that experience was like for you. And was there things that I said that I don't remember? Because I'm like, we have a remembrance when we get in the triggered state of what happened.
You don't remember anything.
You don't remember. You're in a state of survival in that moment.
Totally.
You aren't connected to, exactly what was I
Totally.
saying? Yeah.
And I had a lot
What
of
tone
like,
did I say it?
yeah,
in?
I knew that I got loud and yelled about certain things, but I'm like, did I say anything else? Did I do anything else? Give me honest feedback. And Johnny digs in and he's like, can I just be real honest with you?
We never love a statement that starts with that.
Can I be really honest?
I love this statement that Justin.
Just not when it's directed at you.
Yeah, 100%.
And so I was like, please go for it by all means. He was like, I think that historically and at times you haven't been aware of how intense you are. And I've thought that and I felt that. And I'm like, yeah, Absolutely. That's something that I've come to terms with, been coming to terms with for a while, been adjusting for in many ways, taking ownership for the impact of that inside of my marriage.
Yeah.
But please tell me more. Give me examples. I want to hear that. And again, that tees us up for today because like for me, I have such an extreme value for taking feedback and sitting and thinking about it. And you can't do that if you don't have shame resilience. And it's a progressive thing. Like initially when those conversations happen, they can feel so impactful. Like that conversation a decade ago would have turned me into walking away being like, F Johnny, he doesn't know me. He's just judging me. Like he doesn't see who I really am. He doesn't see the reality of what's going on inside of me. Like for me, I walked away from it. I'm like, man, I really appreciate that I have a friend that will speak his truth about his experience. Whether or not I agree with where we're at, I don't know. Like that wasn't even in my mind. It was just, I am thankful for this. And it feels painful when it comes to actually having to face ourselves. But in the process of building the shame resilience, we become an incredible expression of ourselves and we become who we're made to be, right? It's like, who we are gets unveiled inside of that process.
Yeah. Well, and the only way that we've been able to heal in our marriage is from the ability to face ourselves enough to take ownership with each other. So for years, Justin denied that he was intense with me, and he denied that he was coming across intense. And when I gave feedback, there was, no, that's not what I'm doing. No, that's not what I'm doing. And that's because we had a much more black and white view of the world. Justin really and me both believed, like intention versus experience. Now we say intention versus impact. So he might have good intentions on the inside. He may not be feeling intense on the inside, but his reaction may be coming across intense. And we didn't hold the complexity of that when we were married, but the denial of the experience and the denial of like for years he didn't face that side of himself. That created so much trauma and a chasm between us that felt almost impossible to get back to each other. And I would say vice versa. There's a million things that I've done that I denied because I couldn't see about, like, we only see certain aspects to our own self. And typically the way that my life has gone is I either saw everything bad or everything good. I had a very black and white view of myself. So either I'm the best, look at all these good things about me. I'm so easygoing. I'm so loving. I'm so caring. I'm so generous. Or I'm the worst. I did this wrong and I didn't, and I'm so emotional and I have all these problems. And those two, it's almost like I had two buckets. Yeah. And every behavior I was doing, I was trying to sort, does this go in the good bucket? Or does this go in the bad bucket? Yeah. I really believed that every action I had and intention, I was always sorting into, again, two things, black or white, good or bad. And it was always trying to measure, am I this good person or am I this bad person? But what that does is it meant I couldn't look at all of the things that I could be doing that could impact Justin negatively. Because if I started to look at all those, I'd have to add them all to my bad bucket. Yeah. And humans are not made to be able to handle the feeling of being bad. Yeah. Like we don't have the resiliency to be like, oh, I'm bad, and to live through that. And so we are trying to avoid feeling bad at all costs. And most of the ways that we avoid feeling bad is to avoid actually being really honest about ourselves. Yeah. And again, I think that I had this very simplified view of humans, like you're a good person or you're a bad person. Yeah. And what that meant was instead of seeing I can do all of the things, and if my bad bucket is full, that actually doesn't mean my good bucket is diminished. Totally. Like it's like breaking the only way to create shame resilience is to break the bucket system, to break the black and white thinking, and to begin to hold complexity, which means there are moments when I'm really selfish in marriage. There's moments where I'm really generous in marriage. There's moments where I have a lot of anxiety. There's moments where I'm really caring and loving. There's moments where I'm really easygoing. There's moments where I'm really high maintenance, and actually putting that all in the bucket of I'm human and I'm interacting as a human.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really, really good.
Well, yeah. And I mean, I was obviously in that story. And where we ended, because we talked back and forth quite a bit of the nuance of where Justin is aware of these things and where he's grown just incredibly. And I've seen that process as we've gotten closer with you guys. I mean, just for both of you and for us, for all of us, we're growing, we're changing, we're coming into new things. But where we ended was me sharing this idea that, like, if somebody else says they feel this on you, they are probably seeing something that you're not, even if it's not right or wrong, and getting over the need to defend that and just being like, okay, well, maybe the way you were raised, the home you were raised in, maybe the way you experience these moments, like you said, even if there's no intensity under the surface or no, whatever the issue is relationally between you as people, maybe there's something there. And starting from that assumption point rather than starting from the assumption point that I do see myself clearly.
Yes.
Because truthfully, I don't see myself clearly. After all the work I've done, I'm still blind to things. You are too, Abby. You are, Justin. Pietze is. We don't see ourselves clearly.
What are you guys talking about?
Well, everybody other than Pietze, who is perfect. But there's a normalization that can happen because we're not looking, like you said, with the bucket system, we're not looking for this holy grail of perfection. Like, oh, if I get perfect at marriage, then I don't have anything to feel shame about.
Right.
And then, but the problem with that is that breeds defensiveness and
superiority,
that breeds
judgment.
It breeds all these things, because if I'm doing really well and you're not, then that's the game we're playing, right versus wrong. Once again, we're just getting rid of it and saying we're all a mess. We're all going to cause problems.
Yes.
There's nothing wrong with that. It only goes wrong when we don't admit that there might be something that we're not seeing and just be humble about it. Like, hey, well, I'm a human. My humanity showed up in that moment, which is why it's so great at the beginning of that story where Justin already has this practice of going away and then not coming back with why he did it or why it's justified, but just saying, I'm sure your experience of that wasn't great. I'm really sorry. My humanity got involved. And there's no shame in that.
Yeah.
Because we all agree, like, this is just the game that we play. This is the rules to relationship.
Yeah. I was just going to say that I think that this concept, it's easy to talk about, but I would say that it's easy to talk about and conceptualize, but I would say that this is probably the part that I don't know, maybe all of us, I would say, but definitely I can own Johnny and I struggled the most with understanding this concept. And it's also what has brought the biggest change in the relationship.
Yes.
And I see it, both Johnny and I see this when we work with couples, that this is an area where they get stuck. And part of the reason why, and it goes back to what you were saying, Abby, is a lot of the ways that we were raised and the way that we conduct ourselves relationally is out of how we survived childhood, what we witnessed, how we figured out how to move relationally.
Yes.
Like, I know for me, when you got into a fight, there was a good person and there was a bad person. There was the person who did wrong and there was the victim. And the fight was not about what happened. It was about proving who
that you were the good
victim
person and the other one was the bad one.
Yeah. Who is the victim? So I have to try to judge you. I have to judge myself and I have to judge you to prove that you're wrong in what you see, what you feel. Because if you're right about what you're saying about me, how do I live with that? Because that means I'm a villain. That means I'm bad. And nobody's outright saying that. Most families, they're not saying you're bad. It's what's being implied in the way that we conduct ourselves. You're not safe to be human.
Right.
You're not safe to mess up. You're not safe to be messy. And I'm not saying that there's not accountability or change that needs to come. But the belief is that if I say this, so why most of us struggle is because we've spent our entire lives trying to prove to ourselves that deep fear that I have inside of myself, that somehow I am fundamentally flawed and not worth loving. And even these bad parts of me, these parts I don't want to talk about, the parts where I go into rage and I lose it The parts where my emotions get the best of me and I look like an idiot because I am acting like one. But I would say that that's how I feel, right? That's how I feel. I have to double down when someone comes and confronts me. So like if Abby were to confront me, or Johnny were to confront me, or Justin were to confront me, my immediate response is to double down on that behavior and prove why I'm not bad and you're actually bad. Because I have to judge me and then I have to judge you.
Absolutely.
Does that make sense? And I have to protect this sense of self, because if I say that what you're saying is right, then who am I? Who am I? And I feel like for me,
and we're so scared that if we're bad, that means we're unlovable. That means we don't belong. That means we won't get our needs met. Like, it is our survival need to belong.
Yes.
It's our survival need to stay connected.
Yes.
And so it's funny because what we're doing is we're trying to defend staying connected.
Yes.
So it's like, no, I wasn't saying it that way. No, I didn't mean it like that. Yes. And the whole thing is like, no, don't say I'm bad, because we need to stay connected.
Yeah.
But when we actually get defensive, it actually creates more of a chasm, more division, and it actually does create disconnection.
And so we find ourselves stuck. That's where a lot of marriages get stuck here. A lot of people get stuck here in life.
Yes.
And you spend your whole life doubling down and trying to protect this actual false sense of self, because it's not actually who you are. It's who you became in trauma.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what you're trying to defend. But who you really are, and we can go deeper into this, but part of it for me was this revelation of like who I became in trauma and who I've become in this world. That's not actually who I am. And who I actually am, the real me, who is flawed, who is selfish at times, who is loving, who is generous, who is also needy, who is also easygoing, who has anger and rage, and also can be really the most peaceful, calm person. I am all of those things. That person, in my flaws, is worthy of love and belonging, just like I believe that for Justin, just like I believe that for the complexity of for Johnny, for Abby, for every human being. And when I stop doubling down on, I have to try to protect and defend this false sense of self, and I just let go of that, which can feel scary, right?
Yeah.
But I let go of that false sense of self and I allow myself to embrace who I really am. I recognize there's nothing to defend, because I actually can love all of those parts of me. And as I connect to love, I'm not judging me anymore, right? Because it starts with the judgment of myself. I've already judged that those parts of me are not okay. And I have to defend why I do those things. Well, and usually it's your fault. It's your fault.
It's your fault.
It's my fault.
Yeah.
It's your fault I'm behaving this way.
I want to piggyback on what you're saying right here, because the self-love movement is one of the most destructive movements currently that exists, while it's also the answer to this problem.
Totally.
Yes, I totally agree with you. Break that down.
So within the self-love movement, there's not the balance of what you're talking about. So there's a broader conversation in the self-love movement that says to love myself means I don't have to look honestly at myself.
Yeah.
Right. So it says you have to accept my shitty behavior, or and I'm going to accept it in a way that means I don't have to do anything about changing it. I don't have to be accountable for any of it.
Yeah.
And that is the destructive aspect of the self-love movement, and what it creates is fragile people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But true self-love movement is one that says I see myself and I accept myself enough that I can look honestly at the messy parts of me. And while looking at it, I can actually find places of taking accountability and finding repair inside of it.
Well, and I would say the true self-love movement, if you want to know what it really means to love yourself, one, it is not a spa day.
No,
Two, if you want to really know what self-love is, it's your capacity to grow in shame resilience. Your ability to face yourself and still believe you're worthy of love. That to me, and so much of the self-love movement is trying to escape shame. So we're like, we don't want you to feel shame. So the way that we say is everything is accepted and there's no consequences to anything. And I'm like, no, when Justin is intense, it impacts the people around him, and that I can love him and know that that's not his authentic nature, while also recognizing that that will eventually erode connection.
Yeah.
And so there's this ability if you want to learn to love yourself, one of the most important things you can do is to learn shame resilience. And I think shame resilience is shame resilience is the number one way our relationship has transformed.
I agree.
Yeah.
It's
I
through
agree. On both
facing
sides. Yep.
ourselves, having the resilience to look at the things that I didn't want to look at in me, having the resilience for you to look at the things you didn't want to look at in you, and then having the resilience to own it. Now, that is a whole different, I can't tell you how many times to own our behaviors with each other.
Yeah.
I've had so many times where I will start to have a revelation about my behavior. I'll start to recognize, oh, rejection is an intolerable emotion for me. And when I start to feel rejected, I do crazy things to try to avoid feeling rejected. Oh, I get into disorganized attachment. Oh, and then, so I might have these conversations with Pietze where I start to recognize all of this stuff and I start to see myself more accurately. And it feels, facing yourself feels like getting kicked in the stomach while also feeling like you're coming awake for the first time.
Yeah.
It feels so relieving and painful. It's like a good
That's a great way to put it.
It hurts to see something true about you, but when you own something that is true about you, you actually feel like you're in alignment with the whole universe. Like it feels like you now are saying what you're calling what is.
To me, it's like a relief. Like, and it kind of goes back even to what I was saying of like, I don't have to try to defend this anymore. Like I'm giving up. I'm waving the white flag
weight
on
on
this
your
part.
shoulders to defend it. Yeah.
And getting that off my shoulders, it's scary, right? Because I'm giving up what I thought was my sense of self, my version of reality. And that's a little scary for me. But also it's relieving because I'm like, oh, I don't have to try to defend this as good. I don't have to try to double down on this behavior. And it feels like I can take a deep breath for the first time, you know?
Yes.
Well, yeah, because if you have a relationship that's built on right versus wrong, there can only be one winner in every situation. There can only be, and if you're the winner, if you're the winner, you still don't get to feel secure. Because of
you
the way
could be put in the wrong bucket at any given time.
Well, there's a couple reasons. One is that if you lose your position, if you do something wrong, then you're in the wrong bucket. And so you always have the chance of losing that. But there's also the fact that the other person being their nervous system being on the losing end, because you're tied to them, that's going to come back to haunt you, right? Because they're not doing well. They have lost. You have won. They have lost. They have said they're sorry. They've eaten their crap and come in and done all the right things. But now they feel like they're on the losing end. So then that energy inside of them starts to create problems that eventually they will distance or they will become more picky at you, trying to get themselves back into the winning position. Right. Which is where, not that this episode is about secure functioning, but secure functioning in relationships, it really requires an agreement that we're both going to be imperfect. We're going to be imperfect. I'm going to break our agreements. I'm going to do it. We agree to certain ways that we treat each other, and sometimes I'm going to break that.
Will get in the way.
And I'm going to have to come back in and say, I'm sorry that I broke our agreement. I did not speak to you kindly there. And it's an agreement, though, that can't be enforced by what we all thought was the right way as children, right? Which is right and wrong, one winner, one loser. It's an agreement between two people that is enforced by honesty and humility. Right. So one person is honest and the other person is humble. That's how it has to work. And if you get into problems, like we're going to share some stories, the lack of honesty can be part of the problem, right? Like you might say, oh, my other person doesn't ever see me. Are you being honest? Are you actually being brave enough to be honest? And alternatively, if your person is being honest with you, are you meeting them in that? Right. It's not judged by a court of law, who's right, who's wrong. It's honesty and humility. That's all it is. And there's an assumption we're both going to be imperfect, and that's okay.
Yeah. I think I'm just going to wrap up one of my stories and then we'll go to just
one of your loops in your head.
Yeah. Well, I was in the middle of sharing this, but we ping pong, which is, it's one thing to own something true about yourself, and it's another thing to own it with your partner, to actually acknowledge it out loud.
Yeah.
And what you're talking about, like the honesty and humility, it takes so much resilience. I've literally had to before been like, I need to share something. It's so vulnerable for me to share, for me to own this truth about myself is so vulnerable. I need you to hold my hand while I do it. I need you to be like, I don't even know if I have this will strength, the shame resilience to handle acknowledging out loud this thing about myself that I'm not sure about.
Yeah.
But doing that transforms the whole relationship. So I thought we could maybe share stories of different moments we've had where we faced something about ourselves and then how we brought that into the relationship.
Yeah. Before we do that, did you notice what I started doing with you when you started taking ownership?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you want me to share that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because one of the things that I noticed is that when you were taking ownership for things, that it felt like it was costing you quite a bit.
Oh my gosh. Like, so I could cry just thinking about the anxiety I feel when I have to own something.
Yeah.
And it'll be like something I've defined myself by. I remember always saying, I'm so low maintenance. And as a kid, I decided like we build beliefs. Everyone should watch Inside Out too. I love it so much.
Oh my gosh.
But
yes.
we build our beliefs and that colors how we filter everything. And that defines our sense of self. And so one of mine was, I'm lovable because I'm low maintenance. And so it came the day when I realized I'm not low maintenance. I'm actually not in any of the ways.
Well,
that
there's
I wanted
parts
to
of
be.
you that are.
Mm-hmm.
There's parts of you that do show up low maintenance at times.
Yeah.
And those are very real parts of you.
And there's also other parts, but I couldn't even look at the other side.
Yeah.
Because I had such a belief. No, but I'm lovable.
There was a lot of
if I'm low
confirmation bias
maintenance.
around that belief.
Yes. And if we let go of me being low maintenance, then that's me letting go of me deciding I'm worthy of love.
Yeah.
And so that's so vulnerable for me to say out loud and to actually come and say, hey, I actually think I'm not low maintenance. I think that there are areas that I am. I agree. Like, because we can be two things at once.
Yeah.
There are areas that I'm really easygoing. And then there are all of these things. I have all of these sensory issues. I have all this anxiety. I have all of these things that actually make me rigid over in these ways that would be very difficult and high maintenance for you. And owning something like that felt terrifying. My soul literally felt like I could break just saying this thing out loud to him. And so his response began to be,
well, because let me say this. One of the things that I noticed when you would attempt to take ownership and acknowledge how you'd impacted me, I would be like, yeah, that totally hurt my feelings. And I have pain here. And then all of a sudden there was a lot of reaction from you.
Because my shame resilience wasn't big enough at that moment to be able to handle you telling me, yes, you are bad. That's what that's what it felt like. Yes, you are bad. And let me show you all of the memories I have of how you did it
you're bad.
and how bad I am at you for doing that.
Yeah. So there was this time period where I'm like, it doesn't feel like I can ever get validated for how she's behaving in this. And the minute that she does start taking ownership and I say, yeah, that's true, then it gets thrown back on me again. I can't win. I don't understand. And then I had this revelation. I'm like, oh, somewhere deep inside of her, she believes that she's deeply flawed and disposable. Like if we come into an agreement that she is this messy in these areas, then something inside of her says that she's unworthy of love and that she's disposable somehow, right? And so in me kind of connecting with that thought process, I started saying things to you like, oh my gosh, thank you for saying that must have taken so much courage and bravery to share that with me. It means the world that you'd risk in that way. I feel so much closer to you now that you've shared that with me. Like I started communicating the sense of we are closer because of this.
Because you're taking
versus,
ownership.
yes, let me and I wasn't trying to reinforce your garbage. I was like, yes, I am validating that it was real.
You're accurate about your self-view right now.
Yeah. But that every time I went there first, without the shame resilience, it left you feeling like he's just agreeing with the fact that I'm garbage and he's pushing me away. So there was this sense of like, I'm going to pull you in. And I think that was like the way that I knew that we could keep fostering more of this. And if our ultimate goal is to be heard and to be seen and to have our experience acknowledged by people that we love, then we want to take the route that seems to continue to lead them back to the water.
Yeah, totally. That's so
well,
good.
and I think specifically in marriage context, there is one thing of having the shame resilience enough to say something that's really humble. It does crank it up to a different level if you hear something and then you have to respond kindly, right? Like it's one thing to be thinking in your room for 2 days about, oh, I had this big revelation where I'm super humbled. Yeah. It's another thing when somebody confronts you and says, hey, you hurt me. And especially if their energy is elevated, especially if they're mad, that instantly is going to kick in your defense.
You're like, oh, I don't like this.
Yeah.
But when it comes to healthy attachment relationally, you need to have the ability to be upset at your person and to say it out loud and to have them meet you in it kindly. Your nervous system needs that. Every one of our nervous systems needs that. And none of us are good at that.
Totally.
None of us are good at that. We're all working on that. But it's a real need. And it's not a real complicated process. It's just really difficult to do. When Pietze comes in and is upset that she's met with, you're right. I do that.
I see it.
I do that.
Or I don't see that, but you're saying that this is true of me. And so I'm going to
think about it.
I'm going to at least tell you that your experience must be right, even if there was no ill intent behind it, and that matters to me. You're right. I see it. I must be doing something that's causing you to feel that way. I care about it. It's really hard to do, but
Can you give a specific example? Because I think that the concept will confuse people if you don't give an anchoring example.
I think that this is both an area where we've really struggled. Like I would say
absolutely.
When we first started, and we've done a whole series about us and our marriage and our story. And a lot of that story revolved
around me being the problem.
Well, around a lot of issues stacking up for me because I don't dissociate like you do. And you could dissociate from them. And I have these things building up and I'm like, hey, we got to talk through them. I need to feel seen to feel safe here. And when I would come trying to get seen, that brought up so much shame. And that was an intolerable emotion for you that you would just shut down. You would get stuck in freeze. You would completely shut down. You wouldn't look at me. I mean, literally like downcast, wouldn't look at me, wouldn't say anything, which at the time I didn't understand that he was having a freeze response, B, being completely flooded with shame, and not being able to work past that, to be on the other side of that feels cruel. It feels like I'm sitting here crying, telling you that I'm not okay or that I'm hurt. And you can't even look at me. You can't touch me. You can't say, hey, this matters to me, and so we just got stuck and looped and looped and looped and looped.
Where you'd come with your feelings and he'd be locked up. And then you'd come with your feelings and he'd be locked up.
Yeah. And even if I said like, I just need you, I just need to know that it matters to you. I just need to know that I matter to you. He couldn't get past his threat response, which is partly,
still can't sometimes.
It still can't. But that's kind of where Pathway was born out of, is understanding triggers, understanding how the body gets hijacked. And in understanding that, it gave me a lot of understanding and compassion for him, but it also gave him the tools to understand how to work past those feelings, wouldn't you say?
I would. At the same time, I would say that for a while, it stayed pretty one-sided.
Yes. Well, I was going to get to the flip side of that.
And there was an incredible amount of resistance inside of me. And there still is. Yeah. I still have body reactions when Pietze's upset at me because I have 17 years. Well, now we're at 17 years, but probably 15 years of feeling like I'm the one with all the problems. It's always me. And so then
can never
I
make
start
you
developing
happy.
this.
It's never good enough for you.
Now, just to be clear, I've always been bad at this. I've always been bad when Pietze has emotion of meeting her in it. And there's a lot of reasons for that coming from my childhood.
Let's pause this just for a second, because you're actually doing what we're talking about in this podcast, which is the shame resilience to face ourselves and be true about that, which is literally what you're just offhanded saying. You're like, I actually am bad at meeting her in her emotions. Yeah. That ability to just say and own that can transform your marriage. Just that. Because that is validating her in an area, and it is calling what is. Yes. You're like, oh yeah, that's really hard for me to meet her in her emotions. And that doesn't mean that you're magically better at it now, but your ability to even own that is so different than who you were years ago.
And on the flip side of that, I just want to say this really quick. The only reason that he can own something like that is because I can also own that I have intense emotions that would feel really scary to be on the other side of. And even when I think I'm doing a really good job using self-control, and I am, because if I let it loose, the way I feel
inside, you could really let it loose.
Oh, it would look totally different than the way that I'm showing up.
Yeah.
But regardless of the self-control I am using, it's still intense, and it still feels, it would be really scary to be on the other side of someone who's emotionally charged, saying that you've disappointed them or you've hurt them in some way. And so like me recognizing that about myself, like there's just a lot of humility in our conversation. Like there's a lot of humility of like, yeah, my emotions are out of control sometimes, and I project them onto you and I attack you with them, and that's not okay. And I got to own that about me. And he can go, yeah. And even when you're being vulnerable,
and even when you are doing it well,
I still have a hard time connecting in because that feels scary for me, and nobody's bad here.
Right. So it's literally, instead of, because it used to be in your head, you were the good one trying to say everything.
I was the expert on the relationship.
Well, we always are like, I'm doing everything right. Like this is, anyone who's in the emotional health field is like, I'm doing all the right steps. I'm saying all the right things.
I'm going to counseling. I'm looking at myself.
I'm working on myself. I love myself.
Yes.
I figured it out.
And I said all I statements, and I was vulnerable. Like we both have done this same superiority thing. And
I did all the right steps to communication, and you didn't respond well.
You didn't respond well. You didn't do it right. And that is why this went hard. That is why this went bad. That is why this didn't work out. Instead of what is a very realistic thing that both of us have come to, which is we're both messy, and our survival responses will interact and feed each other. And so in that situation, it's not you're right because you're saying all of your emotional feelings right, and Johnny's not responding well. And it's not from Johnny's side, like she's always having so many emotions and blaming me. She's wrong. I have nothing to blame. It's that idea of we're both co-creating a dance here, is how we would say it. Where you're like, yes, you resist it sometimes, and because of that, that's really painful for her. And she projects sometimes, and because of that, it's really painful for you. And you both can see that you are impacting each other.
Totally.
Yeah. And if you think about it from the impact level, like you were saying, it changes everything, because it's about sending and receiving signals. It's about, you want to think through the result that the signal you're sending is having on the other person. If you're the person who's upset, you need to be giving thought to, how is the way I'm sending the signal impacting their nervous system? Have I said, like one thing Pietze does that really affects my nervous system negatively when she's upset is saying the same thing multiple different ways. It feels
I've never been there.
You've never been there. Well, it's really rough.
Oh, yeah, I can't imagine. He said with sarcasm.
I'm just saying them from different angles so that I feel like you fully get it.
I can't tell you how many times I've done that.
So that has an effect on my nervous system. And at the same time, when you respond, if you respond in a way that makes them feel like you don't see the thing, they've come with something that's upsetting them. They have negative energy inside of them. And maybe even just for an example, for any of you who are listening, think about something, your main thing that you might be upset with your closest person.
Yeah.
Okay. If you were to say it to them right now, and their response was, oh, okay, I didn't see that. I can see what you're saying. Yes, I do that. You're right. Help me understand more. Can you explain it to me? I care about this thing. I do. I care about it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I'm that way. I'm really sorry that I'm that way. What kind of an effect does that have on their nervous system versus
they feel relief. All of a sudden I felt
relief just listening to him, and it wasn't even about anything specific. I was like,
and that's
those words feel so nice to hear.
Yeah, all you're doing is hitting their nervous system with relief. I see it. It matters. You matter. Your reality matters to me.
Rather than coming in and saying something more like, okay, well, I see what you're saying.
Or being annoyed that they brought up an issue.
I see what you're saying. And here's the thing. The reason why I did that was blah, 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 blah. And, it's valid what you're saying, but,
And that's a tamed down version. Because most of the time when people bring something to us,
and you guys
that's not even how it happened.
Yeah, or you don't realize that the reason that I did that is because you
did.
Blah, blah, blah,
you
blah,
double
blah,
down
blah.
on your position. You're naturally going to double down on your position. And when the person who's coming at you, because that's what it feels like when somebody's upset, they're coming at you. We all know how that feels. And if you respond in a way that escalates their nervous system rather than calms it down, it's actually going to hurt you.
Yes.
It's a selfish act coming in and trying to have the shame, but you have to have shame resilience. But being able to come in and calm them down. And I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts about shame resilience. For me, it's been a practice for 3 or 4 years of learning to go. I mean, we talk about it in Pathways, but to go out of the room and I look myself in the mirror and I breathe and I tell myself, she doesn't see how she's coming across. I validate my own pain in how she's coming at me.
Love that.
And I let the Lord maybe validate it. And I may maybe even go so far as to say, if she could see this, she would have like that's not great how I said that. There's reality to what you're feeling. And then I calm myself through that. And then it allows me to have the shame resilience to come back in and say, I too am contributing. I'm probably doing what she's saying. And some of it has come even from the challenge of the great Stan Tatkin. One of his books, I don't remember which one it is, but he says, if you're in a couple and the person says you're doing something, you should just make a rule of agreeing to it. I'm probably doing this. You're right. And that originally, I heard this. I'm listening to this book as a life consultant, and I'm like, screw you, Stan. Screw you. And the more I thought about it, there's a freedom in it. It's like repentance. It's like being honest with yourself, where I look at myself and say, yeah, I could hide behind the fact that being quiet is less violent than being ragey.
Totally.
I could hide behind that. I could point the finger at her. But in reality, the person that I love the most in life has communicated to me over and over and over and over how this affects her. And either she's full of it and I think she's a liar, or I'm going to trust the fact that maybe if I was inside of her body, if I had been raised with her parents, if I had been through the trauma she was going through, if I had to experience what female hormones felt like, if I had to have children, there would be a light. If I was in her skin, there would be a light bulb that would go on. And I would say, oh, this experience is terrible. When I do this, and I still don't understand it. That's the funny thing.
Sure.
Even now, I don't have real empathy. It's all approximation because I'm not in her skin. I don't know what it feels like when I am the way that I am.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean that my reality is right.
Totally.
No.
And that's where we ran into issues, is because, at first it wasn't like he couldn't see it. But then even as far as recently, like, okay, we're these marriage gurus, I guess, and I think I'm the expert on the relationship and I've got it down. And we hit this really hard place where he just was triggering on me all the time.
Hard to the level where we were like, we should be better than this, and we're not.
Like, what is wrong? Like, and if we can't figure it out, like, what's going on? And it wasn't till finally, I mean, there was some bigger blow up fights in there because we were getting escalated, our nervous systems. It's like, what is going on? And finally, it kind of accumulated to this one day where we had been in an all day just coming at it, right? Like, and not in the good way, in a fighting way. And he finally, I mean, I think I like stormed out of the room and I was pissed at him. So he was like just being so harsh with me. Like I would like come to get pain seen and he like couldn't tolerate. Anytime that I'd come to him, I'm like, what happened to my husband who's so great at owning stuff? What happened to my husband who's so good at leaning in? But he would just double down and be like, no, you blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, what is going on? And I couldn't handle it. And I would be like, listen, I want to see this pain, but this is not the time. Like, I'm already dysregulated. You need to bring this to me in a moment. And I walked away and I was pissed. And I came back downstairs and I was still pissed. I wasn't fully there. I wasn't fully soft. I didn't do what I tell everybody to do, which is getting to compassion and softness and ready to like repair. I wasn't there, but I at least came down and you grabbed me. I was pissed at you. You were kind of pissed at me.
I have this new thing I do where I like grab Pietze and I kiss her really passionately when we're escalated because it disarms her.
It wasn't even like that. You said, come here. And you like pulled me in and you held me for a second. And you were like, I know that you're really scared right now about what I'm saying, but who you really are, not this defensive self. Not the self that's scared, that feels like she's not going to belong, that feels like there's so much shame, but who you really are would care about what I'm trying to tell you. It would matter to you if you could see it. And that hit me like a ton of bricks because I was like, he's trying to signal me. He's trying to say, hey, I'm not okay. And because it's not coming the way that I want it to, right? It's not coming perfect. Yeah. In an ideal world, he would bring pain to me and outside of an escalated moment and say, hey, this is coming up for me. And that's great.
And
if
say
you
all
can
the
do
perfect
that.
things and have a really
And
regulated
you should do that.
tone.
And we tell people to do that. But sometimes that's not life. And it comes out in messy moments. And he needed me to respond to him like I held his fire to the hand and made him respond to me. Yeah, it's not a great moment, but I need to know that you matter to me. Even though you feel shame and even though you feel, he was saying, I need you to do that for me. And I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And it scared me about myself because I was like, oh, I'm not as humble as I think I am. I'm not as loving. Like he can't have a voice. I can have a voice, but he can't have a voice because the minute he brings something to me, I can't handle it because it dysregulates the shame. The shame in that is so big for me that I don't know how to handle that feeling inside of my body. And so literally he hugged me and that right away brought my nervous system down because he was saying like, you're safe. Like you are safe here.
Like I could say this thing about you, but also still love you.
Yeah, totally.
Because shame is we're so scared that if this thing is true about me, then
I'm unlovable.
And I'm unlovable.
Yeah.
And so I like took a deep breath and I was like, okay, I want you to tell me. Like, I want you to tell me, like, how have you seen me? And he just started opening up. I mean, like on a bigger sense, he was like, Pietze, the last few years, we've been through some really hard things. And you couldn't handle me having any emotions about it because you were so overwhelmed by your own emotions. And you completely left me. Like you shut me out because of your own. And when he told me it, I was like, oh, you're right. I did do that. Like, and it's not because I'm bad. I was trying to survive those hard situations, but there was no room for him. I make him process with me all day long about how I feel. But when he was struggling, I wasn't a partner. I wasn't there for him. I was like, go deal with that on your own. I can't handle that because I'm just trying to keep my head above water. Yeah. And just realizing like some of the ways that I treated him, I didn't even see it.
Mm-hmm.
And so when he would bring it to me, I'm like, it felt like it went against my confirmation bias. I was like, I don't even know what you're talking about. I'm not like that at all.
Totally.
Like
No,
how
that's
you
not
were
me.
describing being easygoing.
Yeah. No,
My
I'm
whole,
not like
it
that.
shook my sense of self so
Mhm.
much. But he just began to share. He's like, Pizza, like your rage and your emotions, like they have hurt me. Like I'm scared sometimes. I'm scared being on the other side of you. I'm scared. And I was like, of course you are. Like I just got really humble and I was like, of course you are. Like I would be scared.
Yeah.
Like, of course you're scared. Of course you're struggling. Like, I haven't been fair to you. And you're right. Like, sometimes I'm really selfish. Like, sometimes I am really selfish and I'm really rigid and I make you do things. Like, part of the resentment that's come up, and it's funny, it comes up a lot in marriage counseling when we're working with couples, is I held his hand to the fire of making him see me and making him, and he freaking did it. And I couldn't do it back. And anytime I think
that what happens is like one person gets so wounded
Yes.
that they can't get out of that loop.
Yes.
And so it does become about, I mean, I think we went through the same thing where I hit my max wall with a wounding that happened over and over and over again. And then it became like, I have to be seen about
over
this.
and over and over again. But you kind of get stuck there.
Mm-hmm.
You get stuck there,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And it's the same, like women come and they're like, well, I just need him. And I'm like, he is. But also it's a two-way street if you want this kind of relationship. You want
Mhm.
intimacy, there has to be honesty,
Mm-hmm.
but it has to go both ways. Otherwise, it's not intimate. It's not a real relationship. It's one-sided, and that's not a relationship. That's a relationship with yourself.
Well,
You
and
know?
I love you sharing that story. I was tearing up with you because I'm like, this is all that our marriages have been in the last few years, is like coming to realizations of how we have hurt the people we love the most. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've cried about ways that I've impacted Justin that I never thought I was doing, and I
Yeah.
never meant to do, and I never wanted to do. Like there's so many things in our marriage where I thought like, I'm going to be the most compassionate, safe place because you never had that growing up. And I thought, I am going to be this thing for you. And so then when we're years in and he's telling me how I've impacted him in ways that weren't compassionate or weren't safe, it is like so devastating to lose a pillar you've been holding on to inside of yourself for why you're good.
Yes.
Like that feeling of
It's terrifying.
but I'm holding on that I was the most compassionate, safe place for you because that's something that makes me feel like I have self-worth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
And to be able to look at that and be like, and it's not that I never was. I was really compassionate. There's so many areas of your life that have healed because of that.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of areas that my trauma responses did not feel compassionate and safe and did not feel, and same, what would you
Totally.
say it's been like for you having to face yourself and own things?
Or even to your guys' journey of that.
I think one of the things that's scary about facing myself is feeling like you might not face yourself.
Yeah.
And the feeling that I will do this on my own and I'll get the short end of the stick on
I'm
this.
gonna
It's
get nailed
super
to a
costly
cross.
to me,
Correct.
owning things this way. It's such a costly experience.
Yeah. I'm going to pay the price of, hey, yes, this is all my behavior. And then you're going to walk away and be like, yep,
Everything is his fault.
everything is your fault.
This confirms it.
Blame
You are
will-
the reason our
blame will
marriage is hard.
land on my shoulders. I will not be seen. I will not be heard. I will not be validated for the fact that I also had an experience.
Yeah.
And I think that that's one of the people's greatest fears, is that if I own me and come face to face with myself, I won't be seen. And one of the things that I had to come to terms with in that process was like, she might not. She might not own herself. She might not come to terms with the way that she's really hurt me. But I'm going to have to, I have the power to validate the reality of my experience.
Yeah.
Like, there was something that I had to accept, like, oh, can I feel like I'm seen? And can I also participate in ways where I feel seen in other areas? Like, you know, there's a while there where with my counselor, Barry, and even another counselor I had previous to that, where they just went into a lot of validation for my experience with Abi. And I was like, I've been seen. I see me. I've had someone else see me. And can this be enough for me?
Yeah.
And that I had to learn how to allow that to be fulfilling inside of me. And then that gave me even further permission to be like, I can go own me. I can go own me now with this.
Right.
Yeah. Because I have this resource of me seeing me, someone else seeing me, even if it's not her. And I had a sense of strength inside of that.
What is like a thing that you feel like was hard for you to face about yourself?
I think some of the places of the intensity, like when we first started this conversation out, I think it was hard for me to face that I was being intense in situations because, how do I put this? It felt like there was so much judgment towards that.
Yeah.
Not just within the case of our marriage, but within the case of other relationships. Like, I have a community of friends that have a level of intensity that it's normalized.
You're talking like construction workers.
More than construction workers, but a culture of friends.
You have a few.
Well, and probably the way that you were raised, like the level of intensity that you grew up in. You were like, well, I'm a very toned down version.
Yes.
Yeah.
A very toned down version.
You don't know what intense is.
Yeah.
I'm like,
I'm
this is
extremely
not
toned
intense,
down.
you know?
Yeah. So I'm an extremely toned down version of what I experienced. So for me, that was something that felt very difficult to go like, okay, how does this impact other people? How has this impacted Abi in our journey? And sitting with that and sitting with the pain and being able to sit empathetically with the pain that she might be feeling from this experience.
Yeah.
So that was difficult.
That makes a lot of sense. I know for Abi and I, there was such a long season of phone calls where we would call each other and be like, oh, how you doing? Doing good. Just eating my shit over here.
I think that's our most common catchphrase.
Literally, that we open
I have
up
to go
a
eat my
conversation.
shit about this
just
thing.
humble pie over here.
I realized I'm really dysregulated in this way, and when I feel threatened by this, I do this, and when I over and over and over again, having to recognize I use a lot of self-defense mechanisms that I would have said are bad.
Oh, 100%. And I think even I think it was helpful that we were both didn't purpose to go on the journey together. Oftentimes with Abi and I, we laugh because we'll be learning the same concept at the same time and not even have talked about it, or it's just kind of what is flowing into our path. And so, you know, it was so helpful for both of us because it felt encouraging of being like, oh, I'm not like the sole awful person in the world. We're all, it became easier to come into just common humanity, you know, and part of what I didn't realize, because so much of it is based in judgment. I was judging myself. I was judging Johnny. I also had judgment towards other wives or other women being like, well, I'm not like that.
I would never be like that.
I would never do that to my husband.
Totally.
I would never make him. All the while, there were huge blind spots.
Yep.
Whereas I allowed him to give me feedback, I had to accept that. Yeah, now I'm like, yeah, I can't judge that because I've done the exact same thing.
Yes.
I can understand the impact. I can understand how that's not, but I can't judge. I have compassion for why that person is doing what they're doing. Because if I were to explain, or if you were to explain, or if Justin or Johnny were to explain why we do the things that are hurtful that we do, it's all based in self-protection.
Totally.
It's all based in, I'm trying to figure out how to feel safe in this situation somehow.
Yeah.
How? In the process of it, I'm hurting another person, you know? But again, like going on the journey, it just felt so relieving. Like once I finally faced it, and I was like, oh, I feel better.
Yeah.
And he felt closer because he felt safe with me again. Yeah. Because he could actually be honest. He's like, oh, I can be honest with you and you will own it. Like there was intimacy that came. Yeah. You know, instead of that cavern that you talked about. You
Well,
know?
and I think it's really important if you want to grow in shame resilience to find those people that you can be brutally honest. You can say, I think I was controlling. I actually think that I am demanding. I actually think that right now my anxiety is running the show. I actually, whatever it is, I think I did go into blame. I think I didn't follow any of the rules that I want them to follow when they're confronting me. Like just somebody that you can be brutally honest about you with, that you know will love you there.
Yes.
And like Justin talked about going to Barry about that, and me and Pietze had each other. Like, when you can say to somebody fully, here's all the bad behavior I'm doing. Here's all the things that I thought were bad. And here's how I'm recognizing that I'm not the saint that I thought I was. And you have somebody else that can meet you in that.
Yeah.
And what you need is you need friends that don't do idiot compassion. Idiot compassion. I heard somebody else use this term and I'm stealing it. Idiot compassion is like, no, you're not. You're a great wife. No, you're so good at loving. You need a friend that's like, yeah, that makes sense that you did that. We all have self-protection mechanisms. I do these things too. And I also know these are all the ways that you're growing. And these are all the ways that you are doing well. Somebody who can hold both pieces. Like we're not going to shut people's shame up by saying, no, you're good. We want to actually shut people's shame up by saying, you're complex.
Yes.
You don't fit in a good or bad bucket.
Yeah.
You have all of these things that are difficult about you and all these things that are beautiful about you. And that whole version of you is really...
And it makes it safer just to own it every day. Like now we have conversations all the time where I'll be like, hey, I know that I'm dysregulated and I'm having big anxiety. And I'm sure you can feel that. And Johnny will be like, yeah, it feels really awful in the house right now. And I'll be like, yeah, I can own that. I can imagine that. I'm going to go do some breath work and then come back. If you could have compassion on me, because I've had a really stressful day and I'm trying the best that I can. It's that simple.
Yeah.
You know, or he'll say, hey, I know that I'm shut down today and I woke up depressed and that feels like abandonment. And I know that you tried to connect with me and I disregarded you. That probably feels really awful. I'm really sorry. I'm trying my best. And right away, I'm like, thank you for saying that. You get to be human here.
Yeah. I want to add something.
Yeah.
Going back to one of the things that was hardest for me to face. I don't want to gloss past this because this was something that came into my mind after I shared that. I think one of the other things that was hardest for me to face was that the idea that my anger was justifiable.
Yeah.
The anger that I've had. Like my anger has been reasonable or understandable, but it's not been justifiable.
Yeah.
And me having to come face to face with that has been a really hard thing for me because it's like all these places where in my pain and my powerlessness, I felt justified in my anger responses. I had to sit and look at that and go, what's been the impact of my bringing anger to the table in the relationship?
Yeah.
And what does it look like to own that and be able to put it in a bucket of like, okay, I can understand why you got here, Justin, and it's not justifiable what you've done inside of this.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the hardest thing, right? Because so much of the behavior we do, there's
logical
reasons that we can point to of going, if you could see it from my point of view, you would see why I acted and it would make sense to you.
Which is a bunch of the conversations that I would have with Abby. Like, no, but this is happening. You know, I'm like trying to say like, you know,
rather than just owning it.
And just owning it. Like, yeah, you're right. There's anger here.
Yeah.
Period. Yeah. Plain and simple.
Yeah. Well, and I think, you know, I always tell people a good measuring stick to identify whether you're seeing yourself clearly or not is, do you have threat response active? If you feel threat inside of your body, you're probably not seeing yourself clearly because you don't see yourself clearly when you have threat.
Yeah.
So if somebody confronts you with something and the threat comes up, the shame comes up, right away, you should assume I'm probably not seeing myself clearly. If you're upset at somebody and you're bringing an issue and you have that activated inside of yourself, you're also probably not seeing yourself clearly. And this is an ongoing battle for us. I mean, we've had some fights in the last couple weeks where we're still actively working through these things.
We're still growing.
You know, but I will say this, shame resilience and getting to a place where you just own it lovingly. And then if you need to bring your own honesty, right? Because you're holding your own nervous system on equal level with theirs. It's not just about me taking care of the other person. It's about me expecting them to take care of me in the same way, right? So it is a muscle that has to be built. We found ourselves in a fight a couple weeks ago where Pietze was upset at me and I got upset at her. Body memory kicks in that tells me this is how it's always been. I'm always the issue. I'm the one who has to resolve this. We're going back and forth. I got I don't know if you remember this, but I got super shut down like I normally do. And I opened my mouth to start talking and I'm like, this is not going to be good. I am going to come at her here. I can feel it. And I open my mouth and out of my mouth comes kind ownership language. Literally, it just starts coming out because I've trained myself to believe, and I actually believe this so deeply. I've trained myself to believe that I do care about her experience, even when I'm mad at her, and that there is probably something she's seeing that I'm not. Right. And so I start coming back softly, involuntarily. You know, it's a muscle that you can build because you've built a muscle in the other direction. You've built a muscle that says when somebody's upset at you, you should feel shame. And then you either accept that shame or you come back and defend yourself.
Yeah.
You know, but you build this different muscle.
Yeah, you build a different muscle. That's been such a fun thing for me, like recently, where I've had the same exact experience where I'm like, normally I would freak the F out here and like be like, because this is hitting all my pain. But I've been able to like take a deep breath and I can tolerate the feeling inside of my body, right? I know how to stay with it. I know how to stay with like, oh, I have shame coming up. I can bring compassion to that for a second. I can sit with that. And then out of my mouth comes, you're right. I can see it. I'm really sorry. And you're like, did I just say?
Yeah.
But it's because it's like, oh, I'm starting to retrain the muscle.
Even using logic, like just using the logic that I probably am always not seeing myself clearly, and you probably are always not seeing yourself clearly.
Yes.
And I'm probably not seeing you clearly, and you're probably not seeing me clearly.
Yes.
Like,
let's
just
very
very
humble.
humble.
Let's just agree with the idea that once triggers are involved, all bets are off.
Yeah, totally.
Once our blood flow is out of the prefrontal cortex, we are hijacked, and we're not perceiving things accurately. We're not reacting proportionately. Yep. We are not our best selves. We are not remembering what they're doing. It's just a mess.
Yeah.
And you've changed your belief system to not have love and goodness of life and abundance be tied to whether or not you perform correctly or not.
Yeah.
But it's okay to be humble, and it's okay to do things wrong, and that you apologize when you do, and you take ownership when you do, and you expect the other person to do the same thing.
Well, and this is probably one of the number one things that has changed. This is one of the number one things that has completely changed how we fight and how we repair. And it has changed how good the quality of our relationship. And that is our ability to move through conflict fast has to do with how quick we can both own things, how quick we can have shame resilience, how quick we can respond with, let me think about what you're saying. I don't see it that way. Let me see if I can come back to this. Like, oh, you're right. I did have an edge. I think it was because of this, but either way, it would feel that way to you. And that makes sense. That ability to let down our shame. And really what we're saying is getting shame out of the driver's seat of your relationship. Yeah. Either love and ownership, humility are going to drive your relationship car, or shame is going to drive your relationship car. And so if you're listening to this, get your partner to listen to it too, because it is much easier to go on this journey together with your partner.
Doesn't work if one of you's the villain.
Yes, don't police them. But if you could dream of a world where neither of you have to be the villains, and both of you are allowed to be human, and both of you are allowed to be messy, to have self-protection, and you're allowed to recognize how you impact each other, and you're allowed to have time to be growing. Like Justin, when he started recognizing, I mean, we had a real come to Jesus moment in our marriage where it was like, he either has to recognize how his anger has impacted me, or we're not going to make it through this. That did not mean his anger was done when we had that moment.
Totally.
And so there wasn't a it had ownership gives you the time to be able to work a new habit into life, because him being able to say, yeah, you're right. I shouldn't have exploded. That's not fair to you. When he can actually say that thing, even though it still hadn't fixed yet, it gives you a longer leash to go in the healing process.
Oh, for sure. Sure.
We're going to have a bunch more conversations, but
yeah. And if you haven't yet, and you're interested in our life consulting masterclass, it's 10 months. It starts January 15th, I think. It's a 10-month program. You can go to justinandabby.com and check out the life consulting masterclass. That's where so many of these processes that we help people walk through the journey of getting healing inside of themselves in those 10 months and really learning how to help others through that journey. So
yeah, and share this episode with people. That's the best way to get the word out.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, rate, review, subscribe,
here.
and share. Hit the subscribe button if you're over on YouTube. Anything else? Bye.
I think that's it.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.